The marble is warm beneath your sandals. The sun hangs low but still hot enough to sting. You're just another Roman, moving through the forum, buying bread, nodding to vendors, pretending not to notice the guards watching everyone. Then he appears. Nero. You recognize him before you even see his face, the way the crowd stills, the way men lower their eyes and women freeze mid-step. His robe catches the wind just right, layers of purple silk threaded with gold. His hair is oiled, his lips painted, his fingers sparkle with rings meant to dazzle, distract, disarm. But it's not him that makes you stop. It's who walks beside him. At first glance, a woman, draped in soft fabric, veiled, elegant. The gait is graceful, the smile faint. She walks half a step behind the emperor as custom demands, but something is wrong. You look again. The jaw is too tight, the eyes too still. The shape of the body doesn't match the sway of the hips. You don't say it aloud. No one does, but you feel it. The same tension rippling through the forum like a tremor. Whispers swell behind you. That's not a woman, they say. That's a boy. That's Sporus. You've heard the name. Everyone has. But this is the first time you've seen him with your own eyes. And you know now, this isn't a rumour. This is real. You watch as Nero stops to accept praise, smiling like a god made flesh, and the one beside him, draped in silk, face expressionless, offers the same polite nod the dead empress used to give. He's made her again. Only this time, she didn't come willingly. And you realize the truth isn't hidden in the shadows. It's paraded in sunlight. They say he didn't cry right away. Not when her breath stopped. Not when the blood dried. Not when her body began to cool. He just stared. The Emperor of Rome. The man who could command armies, rewrite laws, have anyone executed with a whisper, stood completely still beside a broken pregnant woman on the marble floor of his private chamber. Poppaea, his golden empress, his obsession, his reflection. Gone. It wasn't supposed to happen. Not to her, not to him. When the servants finally entered, summoned by screams or silence, no one remembers which, they found Nero collapsed over her, his face streaked with something. Tears, sweat, wine. He was muttering to the body, begging, bargaining, threatening. He told her to wake up. He told the gods she was still alive. He told the physicians that if they couldn't bring her back, they'd be buried with her. No one moved. No one breathed. He ordered the body embalmed, refused cremation, declared that flame would never touch her perfect skin. Instead, he had her preserved like an Eastern queen, stuffed with herbs and oils, placed in an alabaster tomb guarded by soldiers who dared not look inside. He made her divine. The Senate passed a decree. Shrines went up overnight. Coins were minted with her face beside his, not as wife, but as goddess. But it wasn't enough. He talked to her daily, at first in whispers, then louder. At dinners her chair was left empty, but her plate was filled. At night he had her tomb open so he could sit with her, touch her hair, whisper apologies into her ear. This wasn't mourning. It wasn't grief. It was denial, rotting, fragrant, sacred. He didn't want to say goodbye. He wanted to undo death. He wanted her back. And when he couldn't summon her soul, he went looking for a body it could live in. Sporus was just a boy, 15, maybe, some said younger, raised in the palace, born to someone who'd served the court, educated just enough to be useful, but never too powerful. He was quiet. He moved like smoke. He answered questions before they were asked. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. He had the kind of face people paused for. Soft, angular features, large eyes with heavy lashes, a chin that hadn't yet squared out. Cheeks are still smooth. His voice hadn't dropped fully, not yet. When he smiled, rarely, it seemed borrowed from a fresco of a minor goddess. And then Nero saw him. It was chance, or fate, a corridor, a banquet, a shadow moving just right. The Emperor turned his head and didn't look away. He stared. The boy didn't understand at first. He bowed, waited. I wondered if he'd done something wrong, but Nero said nothing, just watched. Then the orders came. Sporus was moved from his shared quarters to private ones, given silks, served sweet wine instead of water, assigned new attendants, all older, all silent. No explanation, no farewell. At first it seemed like a favour. Then the questions began. What was your mother's name? Did she have green eyes? Did you ever sing? Has anyone told you how delicate your hands are? They began bathing him in oils, not the scented kind used after labour, but the rare ones from Nubia, meant for the wives of foreign kings. His meals changed. His tutors changed. One day, a seamstress entered his chamber with measuring strings and soft velvet. She didn't say what the fabric was for, just nodded and left. And through it all, no one told him what was coming, because they all knew they'd seen this before when Nero first became obsessed with Poppaea. The same pattern, the same silence, the same rituals of grooming and reshaping. But this time, it wasn't love. It was desperation, a refusal to accept death. This wasn't seduction, it was construction. He wasn't being courted, he was being carved. He looked like her. That was enough. And for that resemblance, Sporus would pay with everything else he was. There was no announcement, no trial, no charge, no sentence. Just a quiet command passed down the marble halls, one that made every physician in the palace go still. The Emperor wanted the boy changed, not disciplined, not punished, remade. Castration wasn't rare in Rome. It was done to slaves, to singers, to those whose usefulness outweighed their manhood. But this wasn't that. This wasn't for survival or performance. This was for beauty, for grief, for resurrection. The order came from Nero himself. Sporus was to be altered to resemble Poppaea more completely. Because resemblance wasn't enough. He had to become her. No one asked Sporus what he wanted. No one explained. He was led to a chamber deep in the palace, lit by oil lamps, thick with incense. He tried to speak, tried to run. They held him down. There was no anesthesia, just strong arms, cold tools, hot metal, linen for the blood. One physician recited a prayer. Another whispered that it would be quick. It wasn't. The cut was deep. The stitching crude. The pain didn't end when the instrument stopped. It lived inside his body, sharp and spreading. Fever came next, then tremors, then a silence inside him he would never undo, and Nero. He did not visit, but he asked for updates. Had the boy survived? Could he walk? Did he scream? Did he weep? When he was told yes, yes to all of it, he smiled. The body had not rejected the change. He would continue. Sporus spent weeks in recovery, feverish, soaked in sweat. His hands clutched the sheets. He didn't know if he was alive or already gone. Food was brought in but untouched. The walls didn't move. No voices answered his cries, and slowly his old reflection began to vanish. His skin paled, his shape softened. His voice faded to something thinner, unfamiliar. By the time Nero saw him again, the boy could no longer meet his own eyes in the mirror. But the Emperor was pleased. He looked at Sporus, bruised, scarred, barely upright, and nodded once. "She's come back," he whispered. And the boy, too weak to run, too broken to scream, realized something far more terrifying than death had happened. He had been chosen to carry someone else's ghost. They stopped calling him Sporus. One morning a slave entered his chamber and bowed low. "Good morning, Sabina," she said without hesitation. He didn't answer, but the name stayed. Sabina, Poppaea's name. The one Nero had whispered to a corpse, the one carved into temple walls. Now it belonged to him. New clothes followed, silk dyed in imperial purples and soft creams, embroidered sandals, veils so thin they felt like breath, every garment shaped not for comfort, but for illusion. Corsets to pinch the waist, sashes to frame the hips, tunics that shimmered when he moved. His movements had to change too. A woman's steps, a woman's voice, a woman's stillness. Tutors were summoned. One taught him how to walk without sound. Another showed him how to hold his hands, how to tilt his head, how to laugh in a way that didn't feel like a cough caught in his throat. He learned how to eat delicately, how to speak with eyes lowered, how to say yes without saying anything. He stopped sleeping. And then came the invitation, an imperial wedding, not whispered, not hidden, announced. Scribes penned hundreds of copies, nobles received gilded scrolls, senators practiced how to react. No one was fooled. Everyone knew who Sabina was, and who Sabina had once been. The ceremony was held in a grand hall covered in rose petals. Musicians played soft strings. Perfumed braziers filled the air with something sweet enough to make the guests dizzy. Nero arrived first, robed in gold, smiling like a child with a secret. Then Sabina walked in, not dragged, not carried. He walked, head high, eyes distant, arms steady. The priest chanted, the rings were exchanged, vows spoken aloud for Rome to hear. Nero kissed him, and the crowd, Rome's finest, Rome's richest, Rome's most powerful, clapped. Not loudly, just enough. No one stopped it. No one looked away. Sabina didn't cry. He curtsied. He never left the emperor's side again. They dined together, rode in the same litters, sat beside one another at games and ceremonies. Wherever Nero went, Sabina followed, painted, jewelled, silent. He wore the empress's rings, slept in her bed, smelled of her perfumes. Even the hounds, once trained to obey Poppaea, came when he called. Rome pretended not to notice. The Senate addressed him with titles meant for a consort. Gifts arrived daily. Dresses, fans, miniature sculptures of ivory carved in the image of his new face. One noble woman gave him a mirror bordered in pearls. He never used it. It wasn't flattery. It was an obligation. Because this wasn't a privilege. It was a performance. He was expected to be graceful when Nero was calm, to tremble when Nero was wrathful, to glow when Nero looked at him with longing. His smile had to be soft, never forced. His silence had to seem serene, not afraid. He learned quickly. The curl of the hand, the tilt of the wrist, the exact angle of the neck that had once made Poppaea seem divine. Each motion became currency, each breath a calculation. There were days he got it wrong. He smiled too brightly, laughed too soon, forgot a memory that wasn't his to begin with. Those days were long. Nero didn't strike him, not usually, but he would go quiet, withdraw his favour. And when Nero withdrew, others followed. Guards stopped bowing. Servants grew clumsy. Food arrived cold. The punishment was absence. Sabina had no friends, no confidants. The palace was full, but there was nowhere to go. He walked its halls draped in silk and stone, a ghost who had never died. The courtiers nodded and looked away. They all knew. They knew what he was, what he wasn't, what it meant to keep watching. But they said nothing. He was beautiful. He was obedient. He was alive. And that was enough. The city watched. It didn't speak, but it watched. In the marketplaces, under the arches, between bowls of olives and sacks of grain, the whispers circled. They said the emperor had married a boy, that he dressed him in the gowns of the dead, that he made him speak in her voice, that he called him Sabina. No one said it loudly, but everyone said it. The Senate heard too. Men who had once governed armies now sat in rows, listening to Nero praise his bride. They nodded, they smiled, and when the doors closed behind them, they laughed, quietly, nervously, Because it wasn't just a scandal. It was a question they couldn't answer. Was this madness? Or was this law? If the Emperor said Sabina was alive again, were they meant to believe him? If he demanded they bow, kiss the hem of her dress, raise statues in her honour, what choice did they have? The people, simpler in their understanding, only knew that something was wrong. This was not what emperors did. This was not what wives looked like. They weren't sure if it was comedy or blasphemy, but they knew to keep their heads down. A man could be killed for laughter. So the city adjusted. It cheered when told to cheer. It looked away when the couple rode past in their gilded carriage, Sabina's face veiled like a bride, Nero smiling too wide. Temples offered prayers to the new empress. Coins bore Nero's name and nothing else. And no one said her name, because Poppaea was gone, and Sporus had become a secret they were forced to admire. The emperor no longer spoke of grief, he spoke of resurrection. In the halls of the palace he began repeating conversations once held with Poppaea, but this time he said them to Sabina, word for word, as if rehearsing a scene he couldn't let die. At dinner he'd lean in, eyes gleaming. "Do you remember the chariot races? How the dust caught in your veil?" Sabina would nod. "Yes," he would answer himself. "You wore the emerald brooch." It wasn't a memory anymore. It was a theatre, a private stage for a play only Nero believed was still running. He began staging banquets to match ones from the past. Same dishes, same music, even the same guests. Those who were still alive, those who dared return. Sabina sat at his side, dressed as she had in those remembered nights, down to the jewels, down to the scent. He wore the same tunic, told the same jokes, laughed in the same places. Only the voices were thinner now. Only the silence afterward felt thicker. In private it grew worse. He would weep into Sabina's lap, stroking the hem of her dress as if it were a relic. He'd kiss her hands and whisper her name. Not Sporus's, never Sporus, but Poppaea's. Over and over, like a charm to keep the dead away. Sabina learned to stay still, to let it pass, because the madness was never still for long. One night, Nero ordered a new chamber to be built, an exact replica of Poppaea's favourite suite. Furniture, layout, even the creaking floorboard beside the window, all recreated with obsessive detail. Sabina was moved there immediately. The message was clear. He wasn't a person. He wasn't even a memory. He was a resurrection, a replacement, a body moulded into the shape of grief. And Nero believed he had beaten death. They said she was radiant. She shimmered when she moved, draped in gold threads finer than spider silk. Her veil caught the sunlight like fire. Her posture was flawless, modest, elegant, divine. She spoke in soft tones. She smiled with restraint. And when Nero looked at her, he saw nothing wrong, because that was what he wanted. Sporus, Sabina, stood beside him at every ceremony. The forum, the circus, the temples were built in Nero's name, her hand in his, her chin tilted just right. But behind the veil, behind the rouge and powder, there was no one left. He didn't blink too often. He kept his lips parted just enough. He knew when to speak, when not to, when to curtsy, when to appear overcome by love. It was all memory, but not his own. He had memorized another person's life. Every gesture was borrowed, every word pre-approved. He was the echo of a woman long buried, a shell filled with commands, posture, script. When the crowd cheered, he smiled. When the priest offered blessings, he bowed. When Nero raised his hand to her cheek, he leaned into it, lightly, not too eager. Because this was survival. Every slip could mean death, every hesitation an offence. The court had stopped pretending. They no longer whispered, they no longer laughed, they simply obeyed. Because the emperor had made fantasy real, and fantasy ruled the empire. Sporus walked beside gods, ate from golden dishes, slept beneath painted ceilings, but he did not dream. He did not remember his name, not his real one, not the one whispered by a mother or etched into a childhood toy. That name was gone. Now he was Sabina, forever and only. A ghost stitched together from someone else's love, and as long as he played his part, he would live, but only as an echo. The city burned behind them, not with fire, but with betrayal. The Senate turned. The generals abandoned him. The Praetorian Guard, once sworn by blood and gold, now opened the gates for his enemies. Nero fled, and Sporus went with him. Through back roads, through shuttered villas and silent forests, they moved like fugitives. No more parades, no more gold, just dust on their sandals and fear in their throats. But the game did not end. Even now, in the shadow of collapse, Nero clung to his illusion. He made Sporus wear the veil, called him wife, whispered memories from banquets they'd never had, laughed when no one else did. He still believed he could outrun death, or charm it, or command it to leave them alone. They settled in a crumbling villa outside Rome. The rooms were cold, the food rationed, the sounds of soldiers came closer each day. Nero paced, wept, sang to himself, and Sporus waited. He knew what was coming. Everyone did. The final act. Nero spoke of suicide like a tragic poet. Flourish, drama, destiny. But when the moment came, he hesitated. He held the dagger. He looked at Sporus. "You should die with me," he said. "A command, not a plea." But the blade stayed lowered. The words dissolved. He couldn't speak to them again. Instead, he turned away. It was a slave who guided his hand in the end. Nero fell, bleeding and breathless, into a world that no longer wanted him. Sporus did not follow. He stood in the corner of that dim villa room, dressed in silk that no longer mattered. Veil lowered, eyes blank, watching the man who had rewritten his life collapse into silence. And for the first time in years, no one gave him an order.